In this episode, we will explore how to design an assessment task that your learners can complete to produce evidence that demonstrates how well they have achieved one or more learning outcomes in your course. In the last unit, you determined and described what the learning outcomes of your course would be. How are you going to determine how well they were achieved by your learners? At this point, you may brainstorm interesting questions to ask your learners, but will that be effective? Some learning outcomes cannot be assessed only by asking questions. The easiest way to determine how well your learners have achieved the learning outcomes of a module or course is simply to ask them to perform the actions described in the learning outcome statements. If the learning outcome statements were well written, describing clearly what actions the learners are to be able to perform that would demonstrate that they have learned the related principles, then designing an assessment task based on that described action is easy to do. Can you see how starting with the learning outcome statement will lead you to designing an effective assessment task? For example, the learning outcome of this module is described as, for a given learning outcome, design a task for the learners to complete that will require them to show evidence of how well they have achieved that learning outcome. By this logic, the best assessment task for this module would be, for one learning outcome that you designed in the last unit, design a task for the learners to complete that will require them to show evidence of how well they have achieved that learning outcome. Although the two statements look very similar, but the assessment task is written in the context of an assessment to be completed as part of the course, and the learning outcome is written in the context of an action to be completed long after the course is over. The best assessment tasks are interesting, authentic, meaningful, and challenging, yet still feasible for the learners to successfully complete. Sometimes it is appropriate to assess more than one learning outcome with a single assessment task. This is especially true with large and complex project-based assessment tasks. Can you now write an assessment task for any of the learning outcomes for the course you are designing? In summary, the 5 principles that you should remember and be able to employ from this presentation are: 1. Learning can be demonstrated by having learners complete tasks that will produce evidence of understanding and ability to employ what principles were learned. And 2. Aligning assessment tasks closely to the corresponding learning outcome statements ensures that the assessments are effective in determining how well the desired outcome was achieved. 3. The best assessment tasks are interesting, authentic, and meaningful, and challenging yet feasible to complete. And 4. Sometimes it is appropriate to assess more than one learning outcome with a single assessment task. And finally, assessment tasks are written in the context of an action to be completed sometime before the end of the course, whereas learning outcomes are written in the context of an action to be completed after the course is over.